Hello everyone and welcome back. And today I'm ecstatic to have with me a personal friend of mine, Ivan Misner, who is the founder of BNI. And I have to say this is an important year for BNI because they have just hit over 10,000 membership groups. And for an introvert, I have to say it's pretty impressive that he now has, and I'm going to read this to make sure I get it right because Ivan still tracks every number, which all successful businesses should do, 276,541 BNI members. So if you're an introvert and believe that you can't network, I think Ivan's going to have a few things to share with you. And if you haven't checked it out yet, make sure you check out a podcast that we did together on the Introvert's Edge podcast. We did a double episode talking about his blog post, actually. Oh my God, I'm an introvert, and his unique skills. But Ivan, I'm ecstatic to welcome you back, mate. Thank you so much for coming.
Matthew, it's my pleasure. It's always fun to talk to you.
Well, I have to say, one of the things that I was really excited about the interview that we did, and we don't need to go into depth with it like we did in the interview that we did together, but you kind of blew my mind with some of the statistics that you did in a survey that you did for BNI about, because let's face it, everybody knows that they need to be extroverted when they go out networking. Everybody knows that they wish that they could have those characteristics of that extroverted person, yet your survey kind of unhinged those mindsets that everyone knew to be reality. So I'd love for you to just share some of those contradictory statistics that you found.
Yeah, so we surveyed thousands. I think it was 3,400 people that we surveyed, asking them what are the top characteristics of a great networker. And here were the top 5. 1, they were a good listener. 2, they had a positive attitude. 3, they helped others. They were collaborative. 4, they were sincere or authentic. And 5, they followed up. Now, what I found interesting, and I can drill down deeper on each of those if you want, what I found interesting is almost none of those characteristics are characteristics that you would say, oh, that's an extrovert. Almost none.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And what we found was, the positive attitude could be an introvert, but good listener? Really? Good listener? That's not an extrovert. What do extroverts like to do, Matthew? Talk.
Absolutely. About themselves, about what they're selling.
That's their favorite subject. So helping others, that's not necessarily an extrovert. And sincere and authentic, I think introverts come across a lot more sincere and authentic. So what's interesting is that many of the top characteristics are characteristics that you would often assign to an introvert because, in my opinion, a good networker has 2 ears and 1 mouth and uses them both proportionately.
I think that's really interesting because I think introverts get caught up in the fact that we know we can't network, we know we can't sell, we know we can't speak from stage. By the way, you do all 3 of those every day, and so do I. So one of the biggest things that I focus on is really confronting that stigma because the truth is, there are amazing introverts everywhere. So remember, Ivan is an introvert, by the way, so he's not talking about this from an extroverted seat going, don't worry, you can do it too. He's an introvert and he just happened to build one of the world's largest networking group. So,
and you know the story behind it. I'll just share it real quick. I thought I was an extrovert because I did all of those things, right? And it was my late wife who said, no, you're not. You're an introvert. And I'm like, no, I am. I run the world's largest network. I'm not an introvert. And now I'm kind of mad. And I took a test and it said, congratulations, you're an introvert. Who is a situational extrovert when you're talking about your field or your subject or when you're with close friends, you come across as an extrovert. So you're an introvert, go apologize to your wife. It didn't say that last part, but I
think
did.
It should though. It would have been a good conclusion. But what's interesting though is I think that a lot of introverts project extroversion on everyone that's successful. And I think that a lot of people will hear me speak in videos like this, and they don't see the planning that went before this. They don't see the 2 introverts that had dialogue before about what questions I was going to ask and what you were going to say and how we were going to structure this, or the fact that you wouldn't get on this interview without seeing some questions first, just so that you knew and came prepared with all the things that you needed.
Yes, I like to tell people, Matthew, I plan my spontaneity.
Well, I think that that's important though. And it's so funny when my wife sees me when I'm doing interviews and I have my planned structure for doing interviews. And then when I'm interviewing, it's so much more exhausting because I've got to flow the conversation. I don't know quite what they're going to say. So it takes a lot more energy. So I'm a big planner. And I think that a lot of introverts go, oh, well, Matt's, he used to be an introvert, but he's not now. Well, no, it's just planning and preparation. And I think that everybody, and I think that's why BNI is so great, because BNI provides that framework so that everyone is forced to plan before they come in, so that they've got their infomercial, that they know what they're going to say.
Yeah, if they're doing it right, that's what they're doing, including the extroverts, because the extroverts will wing it. And that's not necessarily a good thing when you're trying to build a powerful personal network. You want to be very specific.
Absolutely. I mean, people like continuity as well. They don't want to know that you're changing what you're doing every week. And if it sounds different every week, then that's not a positive thing either. As a matter of fact, I did a podcast.
Well, now hang on. You can change it up, but the thing is that you got to focus. So one week you talk about this, and the next week you talk about that, and the following week you talk about this. And so you pick small pieces of what you do. So it is different. In BNI, we meet every week. So, if you're saying the same thing every week, it's going to, their eyes will glaze over. So you got to do something different, but different related to the things that you do.
Up under the same umbrella. So we're giving people little chunks of the same umbrella. But if you come in with a different color umbrella every week, then people are going to go, oh, well, this person's moving from place to place.
Absolutely correct. And I have said for years, if you want to be successful in business, you have to do 6 things 1,000 times, not 1,000 things 6 times. And one of the biggest mistakes that businesses make is that they do 1,000 things 6 times. And that's a huge mistake.
I mean, continuity is important, and I think that people like to do business with businesses that continually churn out the same outcome. I mean, you don't want to be the first customer for this new product every time. It's risky. But it's interesting that how many people, even going to BNI, and my mother was a BNI person, as you and I know, and she would plan that infomercial every time. And even though she would make it slightly different, she was going to introduce something different, she would plan it every time so that what she said in that 60 seconds was crucial. And it was funny, I was interviewed on the Sell or Die podcast with Jeffrey Gittemore and his wife, Jennifer. And she said, she used to fly from Charlotte to New York for a BNI event every week. And it was surprising to her. She used to do all this preparation to get there. And then other people would just go in and wing it. She said it was such a waste of time because people didn't get what they did.
Yeah, that's correct. And by the way, she's not the only one that would fly to a meeting. A good friend of mine, Jordan Adler, flies from Las Vegas to Phoenix. Now, right now with COVID, everybody is doing online meetings. But when we were meeting in person, Jordan flies from Phoenix to Arizona. I mean, from Vegas to Phoenix every week. Crazy.
Gosh, it's such a big commitment. I think that let's bring this down, because for somebody to go and make that sort of commitment, you'd have to expect that they're getting something out of it. And I think that a lot of people, especially introverts, believe that they have to be self-promotional when they're doing things like this. And when they go to any networking event, they have to be promotional. And I think one of the things that introverts struggle with is they don't want to be promotional. They feel like that's not authentic to them, that's not being true to who they are as people, and they don't want to be that kind of transactional focus, and they feel pressured to do that. What advice would you give to those people?
Well, listen, if you really want to network effectively, it's not about being promotional, it's about being relational. And there, introverts can do well. They can be relational. You know the old saying, Matthew, it's not what you know, it's who you know?
Absolutely.
I don't think it's either of those. It's not what you know or who you know, it's how well you know each other that really counts. And the deeper that you go in building a relationship with somebody, the more likely they are to really want to help you, to really want to refer you. And that is, I believe, much easier for the introvert to do. So, extroverts have no problem meeting people, but they have a harder time going deeper. Introverts have a hard time meeting people, but they're better at going deeper.
I think that's interesting because there's a line in the sand there. I think the difference is that extroverts, if they were a little bit more reflective, would say, well, I'm not that great a listener and I don't empathize so well. So I'm going to see those as skills gaps and send myself off to training or go and get coaching on how to do that more effectively. An introvert, on the other hand, puts a line in the sand and says, I'm not able to do that because I don't have this gift of gab. And because of that, I can't do these things. So they don't go through the process of learning. So I want everybody that's listening to know.
But you can't do it. You can learn those things.
Oh,
So and this is why it's funny that I didn't realize I was an introvert. What I would do is when I went to large events, not a BNI meeting, but event with hundreds of people, I didn't like to just go around and introduce myself to people. So I always connected with somebody who knew a lot of people. Even, you know what, even at a BNI event, if I'm at a big regional event with 500 people, I ask one of the directors to walk me around and introduce me. And you see, that's what an introvert can do. You go to a chamber function, find somebody who's a member, and ask them if they would be kind enough to walk you around and introduce you to people that you know. It's such a simple technique. Or here's an even better one. If you're going to be in a chamber, volunteer to be an ambassador. Now it's your job to stand by the door and greet people. Hi, my name's so-and-so. I'm an ambassador for the chamber. Welcome to the meeting. Now you're the host. You are officially the host. Dr. Adele Sheely said when networking events, act like the host, not the guest. And it's true. If somebody were to come to your house, knock on the door, you open it up, it's your party, and let's say you don't know them, would you be hesitant to introduce yourself? No. Why? Because you're the host. It's your party. So if somebody shows up, you don't know them, you introduce yourself. Same thing at a networking event. Be the host. Volunteer to be the ambassador. That makes it so easy for introverts.
Oh, absolutely. And it's so interesting, especially in this digital world that we live in today. I often will go to a new event and I won't even wait till I get to the event to get involved. I'll connect with people online beforehand and ask them if it's worth coming, because then they're going to play host to me and show me around.
Right.
You don't even have to wait these days to get in the room. So heed that advice. And actually, Ivan, I want to take one more back step, because one of the things that I've noticed with you, and over the years that we've developed this relationship, I get to meet people that also know you. Now, you and I get to catch up socially from time to time, which I love, but it doesn't matter who I speak to, they all believe that they have this special friendship with Ivan Misner, and they have this deep and rich relationship. Now, some of these people you've just met for a second, for a minute or two. Now, a lot of influencers out there, people know that they've met them, but they don't talk about the relationships they have with those people like they do with you. So I'm just going to ask you flat out, how do you do that?
Well, you're very kind. I think the key is to really show that you care. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I try my best to truly live that. So when I meet somebody, I want to give them my undivided attention. Part of that means eye contact, look them in the eyes, tell them. I mean, simple things like, you know what, it is really nice to meet you. Tell me about your chapter. Tell me about you. You just got to show interest. You have to be interested. And if for a networker, it's not about being interesting. It's about being interested. And so I try to be self-deprecating and have some humility. I have found that people who achieve any level of success, if their ego enters the room before they do, they're probably not really good at building relationships. And so these are some of the kinds of things that I try to keep in mind. And you're very kind. I appreciate that comment.
I think being humble is incredibly important, especially as you start to get into the upper echelons of networking, because no one likes to do business with someone that has an ego about themselves, because it's going to get in the way. What about those introverts that don't have an ego about themselves? They actually have the opposite problem, where they don't feel like they have anything to offer the people that they're speaking to. What advice would you give those people?
Well, let's come back to that for a second, but I've got a saying that I like about humility that you might find interesting. Humble people don't think less of themselves. They just think of themselves less.
That's powerful.
I think it's really powerful. Now, what about those people that don't feel they have something to offer? Well, look, I think we all have something to offer. We all have something to offer. The key is to find that connection with the other person. And it may be a story that you have. It may be an experience that you have. And if you're really new in business and you truly, honestly feel that you have nothing to offer, then listen. Ask questions. Maybe the best thing you can do is to say, hey, tell me about this. You're an expert in this. Give me advice. tell me how to do whatever. And especially if you're talking to somebody who's very successful, because successful people are used to getting hit on to do business. Oh, buy my product, buy my service, read this, do that. Everybody wants you to use their service. To have someone say, tell me about this, help me, answer this question. You take somebody who's very successful and they're happy. Most people are happy to give their advice and some of their experience.
I found a lot of, most successful people that I've met love talking about what they do. They don't love talking about themselves, but they love talking about what they do and offering advice. So, you're 100% right. Giving them the opportunity to share value, it's what they come to events for. What they don't love is getting that pitch. And actually, we were chatting about this offline, about how many people send you direct messages on LinkedIn and me direct messages on LinkedIn, or somebody finds, Ivan Misner, can you pitch him on this? And how often that happens. That is not what people want, right?
No.
If you go up and you have something to sell or something to promote or something to offer, that is the opposite of what you should be doing. As a matter of fact, I know, Ivan, you know this, that I talk about you in my book, and I talk about the fact that when you and I first met, if I had tried to sell you something, I would have missed out on a great relationship that you and I now have. And it has led to, of course, a lot of business for me, which, of course, I'm really appreciative. But
my pleasure.
But the friendship is far more important to me. And what's interesting is people think as introverts that they have to be promotional, they have to lead to the sale. So when eventually is it going to lead to clients? And they want to be more relational. The people that know how to do it well end up with these amazing friendships, but also business tends to transpire because the people that believe in you want to introduce you to the other friends that you can help.
They do, absolutely. And I want to talk about that. But can we go back to because there's something else I want to share on you're saying I'm a big name in BNI, but before we went on air, you said something about people still not knowing me. A lot of people don't know me.
Well, that's just, anytime I speak to someone at BNI, you are an absolute celebrity. Like everybody knows your name and thinks they have a unique friendship with you. But you go outside later and you say, I'm interviewing Ivan Misner. Actually, I was chatting with someone just before this. Who? The guy that founded BNI. Oh, I know of BNI. So it's this celebrity inside this group of 276,541 people.
I'm going to tell you a funny story, and then but first I'm going to quote Seth Godin, because I just read something. No, actually, Seth spoke at the BNI convention recently, and he said this, which I think is really interesting. 99% of people in the world have never heard of his last book. 99%. Now, this is Seth Godin. And he said, I don't care. He said, I don't care that they haven't heard it. He said, you don't need to have the biggest possible audience. What you need is the best viable audience. And so I'm not known worldwide, but I have a very good viable audience. Now, I'm going to tell you a story, Matthew, I've never told in an interview. Ever. I was just told this about a year ago by a BNI director, Laura Hearn, in the United Kingdom. She said she was at a BNI convention a couple of years ago, and she was standing outside of the Long Beach Convention Center, and up drives Pharrell Williams, the singer, in some really expensive car, and he gets out of the car, and he was very nice. She said he was so nice. She introduced herself. She was ecstatic to meet him. And these two women from China come out of the door, and they see Pharrell Williams, and they're like, Pharrell. And then I happen to walk into towards the lobby, and they go, Ivan Misner. And they went running. They turned from Pharrell, ran to me, and Pharrell looks at Laura Hearn and says, who the hell's that guy? Right? And she's like, you got to understand, So I'm a big fish in a small pond. They were obviously BNI members from China who were visiting this convention. And so they felt comfortable running on over to me. But it's really true. I'm not known worldwide, and I'm okay with that. Although I'd like to be known to more people, because I think BNI really makes a difference in the world, and the more people we can serve, the better.
And I think
that was a true story, by the way, about Pharrell.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's really important for people to resonate with this, because I mean, I'd love for you to talk about this plan you had, because 10,000 membership groups was a dream at one stage, and now it's a reality. But the thing that's really interesting is a lot of people that are watching this know that they have a product or a service that can truly help and have an impact. So they feel like they want to help more people, yet when they go to networking events, they feel like they're promoting, and it's not appreciated. So there's an interesting balancing act between getting out your product in front of people or your service out in front of people and fostering relationships. And
Yeah.
I think that BNI, is such a wonderful product. But again, if you're talking to someone that's never heard of it before, there has to be a relationship part first.
Yeah. So I teach, this is the foundation of everything I teach. It's called the VCP process: visibility, credibility, profitability. And so what happens is people go to networking events, and oftentimes they use it as a face-to-face cold calling opportunity, and they go right into sales mode. It's basically a sales spasm, and they can't stop themselves. And I say, look, that's the wrong thing. You're disconnected from, I call it the networking disconnect. People just try to sell to each other, and that's not why you should go to networking events. You want to go to networking events to work your way through the VCP process. You first want to be visible. People have to know who you are. And so that means you got to go there a few times so they recognize you. Then you have to be credible. You have to establish credibility. And that piece takes time. It takes time. So you go from visibility to credibility, and then from credibility to profitability, where people are referring you. And what happens, Matthew, and you know this, you've seen it, people try to jump over visibility, jump over credibility, get right to profitability. In one of my books, we call that premature solicitation, which you don't want to say fast 3 times, it'll get you in trouble. You go to networking events to work through the VCP process. That's my opinion.
Well, I think that one of the hurdles that people face is they generally put off going to networking events until they've lost their job or they've realized their pipeline's pretty thin and they need a client today. So for those people that are watching that are kind of in that situation or don't go to networking events until they hit that situation, what mindset hurdles do you think they're suffering from, and what should they do about that?
So first thing is, desperation is not referable. And when you are desperate, and people they can smell it, it's like a lion, the smelling fear. They can tell you're desperate. So desperation is not referable. If you've not really built a network or activated your network, there's a great Chinese proverb that I like. When's the best time to plant an oak tree? And the answer is 20 years ago. When's the second best time? Today. And so if you haven't started to build your network, start to build it now. Just recognize that it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's a way to build a solid foundation for a long-term successful business. And don't be desperate, because desperation is not going to get you where you want to go faster. It's not.
Absolutely. And I think that's really important for every introvert to really resonate with, because let's face it, when you think about networking, if you're forced to do it, you want to book it into your schedule, and that's the last thing you want to think about until you have to go, and then you'll try and talk yourself out of going until you get in the car and you get there, and that is a recipe for disaster. So what you've heard here is plan and prepare. Get yourself on the organizing committee, get yourself on the welcoming bandwagon, or as I suggested, connect with people on social media beforehand so you actually have people to meet and you feel more involved in the environment. But then you need to plan this a long time ago so that you can plant that tree. So before desperation occurs, you're already fostering relationships so that those people recognize that your pipeline's running a little thin or that you might need an introduction. And because you're giving them value, they're going to want to give you value. And I think the biggest thing as an introvert, you don't need to be the most popular person in the room. You don't need to be known by everyone. Someone like Ivan Misner, who has hundreds of thousands of members, still has people that haven't got a clue who he is, and he's okay with that, and you should be too. Ivan, I know you and I could banter about this forever. And by the way, if you haven't checked out Ivan's blog, he provides a ton of advice on how to do the act of networking, so you should definitely check that out. But I'd love to get from you, if you've got an introvert that's watching this that literally feels that they're terrible at networking and they just don't know the way forward, what advice would you give them to just get started, to get their feet on the ground and start getting some momentum and traction?
So it's a developed skill, and you can develop that skill just like anyone else. I have developed that skill, but it took time and practice to do it. You got to learn how to connect in a room, and I've written about this on my blog, ivanmisner.com. That when you walk into a room and there's all kinds of people there, you don't even know where to start. And we're going to do the God view. If you're looking down and there's two people talking to each other face to face like this, you can't break into that conversation. But if there's two people talking and they're slightly askew, like a V, it's a little easier to slip in. If there's three people talking and they're in a triangle, you can't break into that easily. But if there's three people talking and it's like a U, it's easy to kind of slip in there. So what you want to do is look for open twos, open threes, and open groups. And for an introvert, now this is going to sound counterintuitive. For an introvert, the bigger the group with an opening, the better. Here's why. You can just kind of slip in unnoticed, right? If you're walking in on two people, you're going to be noticed. But if you slip into six people and there's an opening and you fill that opening, you slip in unnoticed, and then it's much easier to start the conversation. So look for open groups and then have a follow-up system. I talk about the 24/7/30 follow-up system in Networking Like a Pro, the second edition. Have a follow-up system that you use to follow up with the people that you meet and work your way through visibility, credibility, profitability.
Look, I think that's really valuable advice. And I think that people who are listening, I really want you to resonate with it. What Ivan's saying is don't go into a room without a plan, because that's going to lead to disaster. What he's saying, and look, he provides a ton. I mean, this specific structure that he's suggesting, he has documented in, tons of this in his blog. So you don't have to, you should check out his books because he's written some amazing books. But a lot of this content is available publicly and for free. Like, I learned to sell watching YouTube videos. Ivan's blog is amazing for learning how to network. There are so many places you can start with low budgets and learn how to become exceptional. But one thing that I guarantee will not lead you to being exceptional is just going to networking events unplanned, unprepared. Especially as an introvert, you're going to think you're just bad at it. And the truth is, you're not bad at it, you're just unprepared. And
we don't teach this. We don't teach this in colleges and universities anywhere in the world. And it's one of the reasons why I think we've achieved some success in BNI, is because we try to teach people how to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, it's a shame, especially in college, because, the fact that you don't learn to network in college when you're out of home, living with a whole bunch of different people, partying is the only thing that really gets you to network with people, and that's terrible. But when you leave and you go into work, I've seen big billion-dollar tech companies that the people that are graduating that have now gone into their jobs are still treating it like college, and they're not fostering real and deep relationships. So
you're absolutely right. And you know what? I'll share something. I haven't shared this on any interviews either. I'm actually talking to Harvard Extension School about teaching a course on networking and social capital. What do you think, Matthew? Do you think that's needed?
Oh, I think it's obscenely needed. Especially for a lot of, and it's interesting, a lot of these highly detailed jobs, because let's face it, a lot of people that are selling things like technology, finance, medical, and a lot of really needed stuff. Like, I was talking to a dentist yesterday, and they just overwhelm people with information when they meet people at networking events. Right. And they just need to learn how to have a dialogue in a way that, and it's actually not as hard as people make out, but they have no idea where to start. And I think that people don't, when they graduate from university or even from high school, they're like, that's it, my learning's finished. I'm supposed to know everything I need. And so while we could say, okay, you need to continually learn, which is what a lot of people in this summit are doing, which is great, we need to start inserting those things into the curriculum so that people continue their learning. Because networking...
Well, Harvard might be one of the first.
Well, Harvard would be the right place to start because people will take it seriously. I've seen, a lot of qualifications now, a lot of universities, I should say, are starting to teach sales, which is another thing that, we need to be employable, sure, but we also need to know how to sell if we want to have a business. So it's great to see.
We give people bachelor's degrees in marketing, and they don't know how to sell. The first thing that a company does is they send them to a Brian Tracy or Tommy Hopkins program on how to sell, a Jeffrey Gitomer program on how to sell because they don't know how to sell, yet they have a bachelor's degree in marketing.
Oh, and especially now, and I think, it's great to see that we live in this world where people really can have a business that revolves around them, their family, and their life, not the other way around, where they don't feel like they have to go and work for someone else. But in truth, if you don't know how to sell, if you don't know how to network, then you're never going to be able to achieve that. So the one thing that I really want you to take from this interview for everyone that's listening is that Ivan founded BNI to create a strategy for people to network en masse. However, if you're going out networking wherever you're going, if you're selling any introverted, any so-called extroverted arena, you can learn a system and process to be successful. Ivan has spoken all over the world. Ivan's networked and he's sold. I mean, when BNI first started, he had to sell it to someone. He had to sell the idea. He's achieved that success as an introvert, and you can too. Ivan, we could talk forever. So I'm going to ask, is there any parting advice that you have that you'd like to share with the introverts that are just getting started? And then what first step would you suggest people take? How can people find out more about you? And what direct piece of resource would you suggest that they go to first?
Well, listen, networking is more about farming than it is about hunting. It's about cultivating relationships with people, which should be the sweet spot for introverts. And if you know that going into it, then you can be really, really good at this. As for websites, certainly BNI.com, IvanMisner.com is my blog that you've very generously mentioned a couple of times. And I'm really very active I'm on all the social media, but Facebook is probably where I'm a little more active. I've got a public Facebook page there, and I'm posting things every day on all of the social media.
And look, I will vouch for that. He's unrelenting in sharing content to get you to be successful at networking. And I will say this, BNI was one of the first to see COVID happening and networking going in a very different direction. And because of that, they invested heavily into technology straight away when this happened. So, I mean, you're watching this and a lot of us are still in lockdown. A lot of us still feel uncomfortable about going to networking events. Don't let that be a limitation. It's so easy to go, oh, can't do it now, I'll do it in 6 months' time. Yeah. BNI has a virtual networking platform which you can test out. You can go and introduce yourself to some people and get started and find a group that makes you feel comfortable. Sure, you can meet people live eventually, but right now, don't let that be an excuse to stopping networking. Check out the
It's never been easier. It's never been easier. And even though we're an in-person, face-to-face organization, we were founded that way, we've always been, I think, a leader in technology. I mean, come on, we have the domain bni.com. How many three-letter domains are there? There's none left.
None.
Hasn't been for a long time. So we were an early adopter. We were an early adopter to transition to online. It was in January of 2020. We started flipping our chapters from in-person meetings to online meetings. And by March, we had all 10,000 chapters meeting online. And we'll continue to do so as long as it's unsafe to meet in person, but we will probably end up going back to some kind of hybrid, partial in person, partial online.
And look, for those people that are listening, you need to, whether it's BNI or whether it's any other virtual networking resource, you can't let yourself be limited by the fact that right now you're at home. And in truth, in BNI, you used to go and meet with your local chapter and talk about local referrals. Now, you can network with people globally, and BNI is great for that. I think there's going to be a load of chapters that are like, well, I can speak to someone in Spain, I can speak to someone in Wales, I can speak to someone in California. Maybe I prefer the virtual platform. So don't let it limit you. Take a moment, trial it out, test it out. And I never, ever sell and never promote things ever when I'm interviewing people. But you need to go and trial out networking, and BNI offers a great way to trial it out for free. So please take a moment, book yourself in for an event, make it 3 or 4 weeks from now so you've got time to plan and prepare so that you're ready to get there. But then start using that as a first step towards virtually networking everywhere you can.
Thank you, Matthew. I appreciate that.
Oh, look, my pleasure. And look, I mean, you know my backstory. Literally, just so everyone knows, my parents could literally only afford to pay my school fees because my mother was an introvert that was saved by BNI. So I'm a massive fan of what you've done. So Ivan, thank you so much.
Tell your mother I said hello again.
I will do, mate. I will do. And look, Ivan, thank you so much for joining. I mean, you do so many podcast interviews and you try to provide so much value even now. So look, I just really appreciate you coming on and sharing with our introverted audience.
Anytime you call, I'll be there, Matthew. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in our next interview. Cheers.